3, 2, 1. Uchechi, welcome to the December 26th podcast.
Thank
how
you
are
for
you?
having me.
Thanks
I'm
for
good.
being
I'm
here.
good.
So let's just talk about how the rest of us are like all casual today. So I didn't even put on my real like shoes, and you rolled in with these fly
Oh my god,
fluorescent snakeskin. Is that snakeskin or alligator? I don't even know.
I think I would call it snakeskin.
Snakeskin. That's what I'm going with. Boots, just killing the game right now.
So you know what it was? I thought it was going to be a nice, crisp winter day, and I was just like, oh, let me throw on this and I try to always like balance it out.
Yeah.
Throw on a sweatshirt, dress, and then I was like the boots.
Yeah, those
And
boots
then
are
I stepped outside and it was snowing, and I was just like, wow, it's too late for me to change. So here I am. But no, I love a good boot. I love a good thigh high boot.
I packed them. So mine were suede and snakeskin. But I just never actually put them on because you can't see them on camera.
Facts.
It didn't exactly happen today. But yeah.
So now what's funny is that like on the Grapevine, when people come, because you can only see us from the waist up. So when people come, they're like, they look at our feet and they're like, oh, you guys are wearing heels. Like Ashley will have like, fly ass sandals, feathered like, heels. And people look down and they're like, we can see you have heels on. Nobody sees them. And we're like, this is a whole production. Everything's done.
Right. For
head
sure.
to toe. So, and I think that's like kind of like, I just how I move through life.
Yeah. And I think for the first probably 18 months of the show, that was exactly I don't know when it switched. I still bring them, and sometimes I'm feeling fancy, and I'll put them on. But often too, we like raw spaces, so the temperature's not right. So I'm like, okay, I'm just keep my Uggs on since we're gonna be.
No,
here
I
all
understand.
day.
There's been plenty of times I've taken off my shoes. I'm like, this is a lot. I'm tired.
Yes.
Or like I have the Adidas slides on the side just to. Sometimes you gotta. It's not every day.
Sometimes you gotta chill, right? But yeah, I'm definitely loving
Thank
these
you.
boots that you have
Thank
on.
you.
So let's jump into your story.
Okay.
Who is Uchechi Chinyere?
Oh, Uchechi Chinyere is. She is a creative. She is an older sister. She is a daughter. She's a friend. Depending on where she is in her life, she's a partner. She's a podcaster, a lover of freedom. So, yeah, that's what I would call myself. My name means will of God, and then so I use my middle name as my last name.
Okay.
So Chinyere also means gift of God. So I would consider myself a gift of God and the will of God. So whenever I work knowing that it's meant to be.
That's a great name. That's a great name to have, right? You can't. I feel like if you have that name, you can't move through life trying to will things to happen that are not the will that God has for your life when you have that kind of name.
It's really hard. Sometimes I feel like my mom set me up for failure because it's like it's not going to happen if it's not meant to be.
Yeah.
No matter how much I force it, no matter how much I want it to be. And you would think that my mother would understand that being that she gave me the name, but
But parents have their own agenda.
exactly. Because she was just like, oh, so will of God means for you specifically, not my will. I'm like, yes, not your will as my mother, God's will. And sometimes those two don't collide. I don't know if you realize that, but yeah, she's learning slowly.
So since you mentioned being a creative and a lover of freedom, that may not jive, I'm suspecting, with the way you grew up and your upbringing. So tell me a little bit about your childhood and your family dynamic.
So I'm first generation Igbo, Nigerian. So we're from the southeast of Nigeria. I'm the oldest of 7 children.
Wow.
So my father actually went to college here. He came here in 72, right after the Newark riots. He came in right after that. He went to Rutgers University. And then went back and forth to Nigeria for a while. He actually grew up in Cameroon. So he didn't know Nigeria too well until he became an adult. And then he went back and forth. And then he met my mom along one of these, on one of his trips back. My parents are the quintessential Cinderella story. See each other, meet each other. We must get married 2 weeks later. And here we are 35 years later. Yeah, my father saw my mom and was like, that's my wife.
Can that just happen now? Anyway.
Right. And so, yeah, they get married. This is 85, 80. Yeah. So they get married. Because my mom told my father that she wouldn't leave Nigeria unless she was married. Because he was like, oh, I'll just file papers for you and you can come over. And she was like, I'm actually not going anywhere until I have a ring. And then he was like, well, get married. So they got married.
Wow.
So they get married. He files for her. I think back then it took 2 years to complete all the paperwork after marriage. And she came here so that we can come here legally, no problems and stuff like that. So she came in 87. And I was born in 88, June of 88. Yeah.
Wow.
So, and then I grew up in Newark. I grew up, in hindsight, I realized how that it was rough, that Newark was rough. We didn't grow up with money at all, actually, but my parents are very good at sheltering us. And there is a great privilege having two parents who genuinely like each other. So we didn't live in a volatile environment for us to realize the extent of the world around us. My parents didn't allow us to go outside without their permission. Like, we couldn't pass the gate. Like, they allowed us to play outside, but we weren't allowed to go past the gate. We weren't allowed to go to the store by ourselves, go to like the library by ourselves. It was very much like, we'll take you. We didn't take the bus to school until about high school. And and then like, it was very much so like, here are your siblings, you have to take care of them. You are responsible for them if anything happens. My father started a lot of businesses. My mom was a nurse. She's still a nurse. And so there was always a parent around, along with some elder relation. My grandmother lived with us, so my paternal grandmother and maternal grandmother both lived with us. Several of my father's siblings lived with us. Family members consistently came through our house. We were that house that, like, whenever somebody needed somewhere to stay, we were that house, despite the fact that my mom by this time had like 5 children.
Oh,
and
my
everybody was
gosh.
just like, oh, like, you need a place to stay, go and talk to, give my parents names, and then somebody would show up at our door. And it would be somebody who just came from Nigeria, somebody who just got kicked out of like, somebody else's house. I know I had an uncle who had just come out of prison, and he stayed with us. So that was kind of the household that I lived in. My parents are extremely religious, devoutly. They go to mass every day.
Every day.
Devout Catholics. And we were raised like that, all baptized, all first reconciliation, first communion, confirmation, all those things. The expectation is for all of us to get married in the Catholic Church.
And you got your thigh out over here and everything.
So like it really, my mom struggles with me.
I'm sure.
She struggles with me in a lot of ways because, for a long time I was the perfect Dada, and Dada's first daughter in Igbo. Anything you need me to do, I rarely argued with my parents. I rarely talked back. I kept my siblings from doing the same thing. When I was I was like a toddler, my mom called me her shadow because wherever she went, I'd go. If I couldn't, I immediately took on the role as mother. So she assumed that this is going to be like smooth sailing for the rest of her, for the rest of her life, that she had the perfect daughter. If the rest of them didn't work out, fine, but she was good with you. She has that perfect first daughter, and I have 6 sisters. So
oh my gosh, it's all
girls? 5 sisters. I'm counting myself. 5 sisters and 1 brother.
Okay.
So she's just like, if she can figure it out, the rest of them will figure it out. It's like, and she would run into, and the thing with being the oldest is that your parents are more likely to run into problems with the other children,
right?
Because they have a little more space to do the things that they want to do, whereas and they don't feel the brunt of consequences because many times it's visited upon the eldest child. And that's what would happen. I would be the one who would get reprimanded for the behavior of my siblings. It'd be like, why is your sister doing this? So why is your sister doing that? So I'd have to be the one to go back and be like, you can't do this, can't do that. And so for my parents, it was that, especially my mom, somebody who grew up with all brothers, didn't really have a sister till she was almost 20.
Wow.
She thought that I was going to be like, it was great. Like, she saw me as her best friend. then we got to like, and I think I got to college, and I'm like, no, because we can't be best friends, because you have made it clear that you're my mother, which is fine. But yeah, because I learned, I've always seen my parents as human, but I realized that many parents want their children to be an extension of themselves.
Absolutely.
Who want to live vicariously through their children, things that they could not do, they expect their children to do it, and they get and the disappointment sets in when that doesn't happen. So it gets very difficult to allow your child to live their lives because that's not what you wanted for them. So yeah, and so as I got older and I realized that a lot of the things that my parents believed I didn't believe, and I started to create, and I would call myself a late bloomer because I don't think I really stepped into who I was completely till maybe my mid-20s, late 20s, and then fully kind of, in the past couple of years, I've been fully expressing myself. And it's come in various ways. It's come in piercings and tattoos, and it's never been a rebellious form. It's genuinely a form of, showing creativity. And my parents are like, what is this? I remember the first time my mom saw one of my tattoos, it was because I went to the emergency room. I had gotten really sick. I had gotten like a stomach virus, and she was helping me change. And then by this time, I had been hiding for years. I think at my 19, I started getting tattoos, and I had been hiding this for years. And it must have been like 28, and I went to the hospital with her, and because I needed a ride there, and so she's helping me get into like the hospital gown, and she just gasps, and I'm like, what happened? What happened? And she's like, what is that? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she was just like, oh, Uchechi, so you've let somebody decimate your body. I was like, oh.
Oh, God. The level of like dramatics and exaggeration.
Like the doctor ran, like the nurse, I think it was a nurse, runs out and is just like, oh my, is everything okay? Is everything okay? Because she thought I had passed out. And I was just like, she found my tattoo. Nurse like runs back to the station because she wanted to scream. Like she's like laughing at the station, and she's like cracking up. I think the nurse is Ghanaian. She's like, I completely understand.
Oh, she knew what was up. Yeah.
So, but yeah, like that's kind of like that was the life I grew up in. And then, so I had, on one side, I have this like very like Catholic, Igbo, strict upbringing, and on the other side is I'm growing up in the midst of Newark. Like this is like I'm growing up in late 90s, early 2000s. I'm growing up in a city that has is super black,
right?
Super black, but is also experiencing still kind of like healing from the riots and healing from the things that happened after it, and he dealing with a mayor who had been embezzling money for years. So like I'm growing up in a city that is really, it really impacted who I was, but at the same time, for a long time, I was ashamed to be from Newark.
Really?
I grew up with a lot of for a lot of Nigerians, after a couple of years, they'd move away from Newark. They would move into the suburbs, the surrounding suburbs. So you would have Maplewood, South Orange, West Orange, Montclair. They would move out there, or South Jersey they would go to. My parents stayed in Newark. My father was adamant that we would stay in Newark because he was like, it's better for college. You're more likely to get financial aid if you stay in the inner city. And he wasn't interested in trying to, and I think both my parents have never really been interested in trying to flaunt a life they couldn't afford. So they knew that if they moved to a suburb, they were already struggling with the house that we lived in. They weren't interested in struggling with because property taxes in Jersey are insane.
Ridiculous. Especially when you start talking about Maplewood, West Orange, etc.
And so we have family who are like, what are you guys doing? Like you're not doing the best thing for your children. Get them out of these schools. Newark is going to eat them alive. Meanwhile, I think what made us so successful was going to school in Newark. We went to private schools connected to our churches, but they were all black. The only people that usually were white were like the teachers, the nuns. I spent my whole life up until college and 1 year randomly in Pennsylvania, where the most difficult thing for me to be was Igbo. Excuse me, not black. And then college And then my freshman year of high school, when we spent a year in Pennsylvania, because my parents were like, okay, maybe we should do this like suburban thing. And then they took it too far. Went to the Poconos.
I was about to say, tell me it wasn't the Poconos.
I was like, my parents,
Why do people leave Jersey and go to the Poconos?
I was like,
I don't
this
understand
extremity. Like, I don't know why we couldn't just like move to like Chatham. I don't like what, but move to Pennsylvania for a year. It was the first time I had ever encountered the idea that, oh, like, everybody has a problem with blackness.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just the stories my father told me. It's not just like casual racism. This is like genuine people telling me that I am not going to amount to anything because I'm black, or telling me that I plagiarized my paperwork because it was too good for it to come to me. And this is like freshman year of high school. It was the worst. And it's just like, when you think back, and I think back at it, I'm like, this is a time where, this is puberty. This is like, a formative year. And I'm like, I hate everybody. Like, this is miserable. Thankfully, my parents are like, we actually do not like it too. So we moved back to New Jersey. And it wasn't until I got to Rutgers that I experienced it again, where being black was just the biggest problem.
Yeah.
Like, gender has always been an issue because I grew up in the culture that I grew up in. So like, I've always been hyper aware of gender, and not that I've never been aware of race, but there is a way that race is approached when you truly become you are the minority.
Right.
You are seen as you are the speck of vanilla, and you are the vanilla bean in the vanilla. Yeah. Everybody around you is white, and you are this, to them, you are this, you're either this monster or this pet.
And it could not have helped that your name was Uchechi.
I stood out immediately. There's never been a time when I have been able to hide the fact that I'm not only I'm a black person, I'm also I'm not from this country, or my parents aren't from this country, because myself, I'm American, but my parents aren't from here, and it's clear that I'm different. And it always showed up. Always. There's been a few times when people think I'm Indian. They would see my name.
Really?
Yeah, and they would be like, oh, and then they would see me, and they're like, oh, so you're not. You're not. And I've also known how many places I've gone, and especially when I got into the job market, I would put in applications for places, and I knew that I wasn't going to get called back, because when people can't pronounce my name, they won't bother. They'll just throw it away, because the idea of trying to pronounce it and trying to deal with it, they won't do it.
And my thing, and that I just don't understand, is a simple question. Like, that's it. And to me, I'm more offended when people just butcher it and move on, as opposed to saying, can you just tell me how to pronounce it? And why is that so hard? I don't understand why that's so difficult.
And that's something I went through my whole life, where people would either butcher it, people would say, hey, you, like, just, I don't know what your name is, so you over there. Or they would give me names. They would just rename me.
Their own names.
They were like, we're going to call you. I went to right before I went to high school, I had went to like an open house for one of the high schools in the area. And one of the seniors was like, oh, okay, your name is Uchechi, so we're going to call you Uch. I'm like, no.
Uch.
I was like, that's not my name. Like, so that's not my name. And she was just like, no, like, Uchechi's just too much. And I'm like, it's 3 syllables. Like, 3 syllables. 3 syllables, 7 letters. It's fine. And I remember thinking, like, I'm always going to argue about my name. Yeah. And that was the case. And and by that time, I had already felt ashamed of my name. So I was giving myself nicknames. I had gone through this period where I was just trying to find a nickname that fit me. So I had gone through like several, and it started like when I was 10. And then by the time I was in 8th grade, I had found something that like fit. And I was just like, you didn't even ask me if I had a nickname. Like, just assigned one. And I didn't like that. I did not like when people did that to me. And it would always make me seem difficult, because I would be like, that's not my name, or here's my nickname. Or then as I got older, here's my name. Because I stopped allowing people to call me a nickname, and I'd be always vocal about it, and I would be seen as difficult or annoying
for asking someone to call you by
the name that I was given. So that was a constant constant. I could never, now I'm happy for the name. I'm not interested in hiding anymore. But back when I wanted to hide, my name always gave me away. And I don't have, like a lot of non-American blacks, particularly from West Africa, will use the English name. I didn't have one to like run behind. My father was not interested in giving us English names, and for a long time I used to be so frustrated. But now I'm completely grateful because I completely understand.
Right, and it's interesting because you mentioned feeling like a late bloomer. I hear this a lot from Black people who've grown up in really structured, strict homes, and then have to exist in the world and overcome whatever obstacles they're facing by standing out for one reason or another, where you're in a sense conforming to function at home and have the acceptance at home, and also dealing with being seen as difficult when you stand up for yourself. And I think that sometimes manifests itself beyond being a teenager into young adulthood, where you may know who you are, but you don't feel fully safe to present that to the world without explanation. And I find having friends, white friends and Black friends, my white friends, and even in our early 20s, would make decisions without explanation to their parents. My Black friends, a lot of them, like it was I don't know how I'm going to tell my parents.
Right.
Like even if you pay your own bills, it's like feeling like you have to be beholden.
There's a PowerPoint that has to be created in order to like present like. Yeah, I'd have friends like, despite not having white people in my life, when I got to college, that's when I had more white friends than Black friends, and they would do whatever they wanted. I was amazed. Like, oh, we're going to spring break. And I'm just like, oh, so how do you guys pay for this? Because where you like the idea? Where do you get the money from for spring break? Oh, my mom just gave it to me. Oh, so she knows that you're going to Cancun? Nah. So she gave you money,
and you didn't have to explain.
She has no idea where you're going. Oh my God! Like I was blown away because every dime that I asked my parents had to be accounted for. Every place that I was going, it had to be accounted for. Even being on campus, I remember being so afraid to go out to parties, to go out to places, because I was like, I know my parents are going to find out. I know they're going to find me, and I'm going to be in so much trouble. There was one time where I was out with friends, and my parents showed up on campus. Just randomly.
Were you at Rutgers Newark, or were you
Rutgers New Brunswick?
So you were in New Brunswick. You weren't even at
no. So this is
campus.
an hour away,
so
and I don't know.
Drove.
Their parents just like showed up. They were like, I think they were like going somewhere else, and they're like, oh, we'll just stop by. Or like stop by on the way home, and it was like 3 a.m. and I was out at a friend's place, and they texted me like, hey, can you open the door? And I'm just like, what? And they're like, oh, we're at the front door, can you open the door? And I was just like, what? I'm across campus. And I remember hauling. Can I curse here? I don't know if that's okay, or
you can use the minor ones.
Yes. Okay. So I was hauling butt across the hall, across the across the campus, and I get there, and they're at my room, and I don't know how they had got into my room, or
so they actually were in the building.
So they asked me to open the door. I'm hauling, but I'm just like running across campus, and they're like, and they get upstairs, even though they had asked me that. I don't know who opened the door for them because you need to be buzzed in. They get inside, go up to the 6th floor where I was living at the time, and they get there. How they opened up my door, I'm convinced that my mom had a key created, like he made. I'm convinced, because there's like my roommate wasn't there. I'm trying to remember, and I knew that my RA would never open the door for parents. Like,
so you had a roommate, but they were planning to just barge in because at some odd hour.
What does that matter? Like, what do these things matter? Like, oh, this is somebody else's child with a completely different life. You have no idea what like she could be. No, they're all children. Like, no big deal. So, and I remember getting upstairs, and I'm like, how did you get in? And like, where were you? And I'm like, no, like, we have to discuss how you got into my room, how you got into this building. And my mom was like adamant, like, no, where were you?
Oh God.
And I'm like, I was at the bathroom downstairs because this one isn't working. The lies that I used to make up on spot, and I used to be like this, and I think around like even into my mid-20s. And after a while, I was like, this is ridiculous.
Right.
Why? Because I don't, I've always had an affinity for telling a story. I've been really good at telling a story. I've always been good at, like, I call myself a natural liar, like, not because I'm interested in doing it, but because, like, it's so convincing. And I knew that from a child, that I would tell people anything and they'd believe me because I was convincing enough. And I'd always go back and be like, I was actually, like, lying. And they would be like, what? And it would be adults. And I found that power fascinating, that I could go to adults and I would tell them, I would make up a story in my head and I'll tell it to them and they would believe that it was real. And then I'd come back later and I'd be like, that wasn't a true story. I just made it up. And they're like, what? So as I got older, it just became a mechanism to, like, really kind of, like, deal with how my parents were, like, very, like, intrusive. And like, they mean well.
Right.
It's therefore, to them, it's like a form of love. But it was my way of having to deal with, like, constantly, because I knew the truth would cause me more trouble than I needed it to be, like, than you need. And I knew that other children or other kids could tell their parents, like, what it was, like, how difficult it is to tell your parents, I'm just crossed, like, I was just some friends with,
right. That's what college life is.
It's not a big
right?
deal, right? No, I knew I couldn't tell my parents, so I would just, like, make up things and it'd be so convincing, and it just, like, amazed me. And I was just like, but after a while, it was like, this is not supposed to be, like, I'm supposed to be able to say what exactly is happening, because, like, what if something does happen to me? And so I started telling the truth, and that's when my mom was just like, I don't know you. And I'm like, no, you do.
Right. Well, what does that look like, changing the dynamic and sort of reclaiming your power, claiming it for the first time, and speaking your truth with parents, especially parents like yours? Like, what does that look like in the beginning?
A lot of arguing. And a lot of anger comes out. A lot of things that you never realized bothered you, it bubbles up to the top. Excuse me. And then for them, there's this, like, lack of gratitude. We came to this country. We, gave you everything we possibly could. And here you are telling us that you want to do whatever you want to do without our input. How dare you? So there's constant clashing. And then because I'm the eldest, it's like you are poisoning the minds of your siblings.
Yeah.
So then there's the guilt of that. So the first, it's still an ongoing battle, because for a lot, I always say that Nigerians don't see you as an adult until you have children. And even then sometimes it's not.
It's a little sticky situation.
Yeah. So, like, but usually if you have a child, that's when they really see you as an adult. Cause my mom would be talking about somebody and they'd be like 40 years old and she's like, oh, that young boy. And I'm like, they're not a boy. This is a grown man. And she was just like, oh, well, he's not married, doesn't have kids. And I'm like, doesn't mean anything. This is still an adult. And and it's like conversations like that would happen more often because we would, like, I first started doing it where I'd be like, you have to hold my mom accountable or my parents for the way that they speak, in order so they can recognize that you're not dealing with children anymore. You're dealing with adults. And then my siblings follow suit, and my mom would just be so frustrated, and my parents would be like, my father especially would be like, okay, the conversation is over. And I'm like, you cannot end the conversation because it's not going the way you want. And my father was like, this is disrespectful. How dare you guys tell me how to run a conversation? And I was like, all right, it is over.
You know what? I'm just going to backtrack.
It's okay.
On that, yeah.
But yeah, that's how it would be. And it would be like the situation of my mom finding that I had tattoos and making it thinking that it was an act of rebellion when I genuinely wanted it. And I had always been, and I overanalyzed everything and overthought everything. So when I started thinking about getting tattoos, I was like 17, and before I could even think about it, I had did my research and all that stuff. So I had always been that person. And my mom, she'd recognize that. And both my parents recognized that whenever I did something that they agreed with, they would recognize that I had put thought into it, but it was something they disagreed with. It had to have been like a spur of the moment act, a rash decision, or act of rebellion. And I'm like, and that would be the frustration, having to explain myself over and over again, and remind them that, like, the person that I am when you are in agreement is the same person that I am when you are in disagreement. It's just showing up more because I deserve to be my own person.
Right. So how did this manifest in terms of career choices and academic choices for you, this clash with your parents?
What's funny is that my father said when I was 4 years old, we were driving through Newark, and he was dropping me off at school because I went to preschool in North Newark, and we lived in South Newark, so we'd have to like drive through Newark. And I have always been like a very like I read a lot as a kid. I started reading at like 2.
Wow.
And my father was like, oh, like this is great. And he bought like Hooked on Phonics, the Peter Rabbit books, like everything that he could find to encourage this, he did. So by that time, my vocabulary was extensive. And I remember at that, he told me that I was telling him that I was going to change Newark, that I was going to, I was just like, the mayor's not doing a good job, so I'm going to be the mayor. In fact, I'm going to be the president, and I'm going to be a doctor, and I'm going to be a surgeon, and I'm going to sing and act on top of all of this. And I was adamant that I was going to sing, act. I was like, and I'm going to write stories. My father was just like, let's focus on the medicine.
Right, of course. Like, let's just zero in on this surgeon.
Let's forget about everything else. But and as I got older, my parents are like, you're going to be the doctor of the family. You're going to be the first doctor of the family. My father had wanted to go to medical school, but coming in as an immigrant, there wasn't a space for it. My mom was a nurse, so she was just like, I just want my children to follow in my path. So whether it be a nurse, whether it be medicine, pharmacy, I'm fine. I just want y'all to continue on that path. And of course, it's because these are guaranteed, guaranteed jobs. Like, you're bound to make money. You're always going to find a place where you'll need work at. And also it comes with people respect it.
Right, absolutely. There's a level of prestige.
Exactly, that comes along with it. So, and I was going with it. I think in high school I realized I don't like blood. How am I going to do this? And so I decided to go into pharmacy. And my parents were like, that's great. It's fine. You know, pharmacy was actually around the time, I think I went to high school in 2002, 2006. Everybody was going to pharmacy school. At that time, the programs for the 4+2 programs were just popping up. So nobody had to go like the 4+4 anymore. So you could just go straight into pharmacy school. And my parents were like, this is great. Get to college, get into the pharmacy program at Rutgers, get to college, fail chemistry the first semester.
Boy, chemistry. Chemistry is always the turning point for people. Like,
and I was a fantastic student. I had spent I had never dealt with failing anything my whole entire school career until college. It was the first time I came face to face with failure. And I buckled. I didn't even know what that looked like. I didn't know how to handle it. I was not prepared for it. And I said, I have to get out of this program because I'm failing already. And the thing in hindsight, I could have pushed through, but I was like, I don't want to push through.
Right.
I don't know what if I failed even more? And the crazy thing is I did, because what happened is that I left the program, but I decided I'm going to go into medicine. By this time I had gotten over my your fears of blood. I think I did. But, decided that I was going to go into medicine and decided that I was going to become a bio major, which I went to bio, and I'm doing poorly in every pre-med class.
Oh, gosh.
I don't think I did okay in orgo, did okay in bio. I had met my match in physics. I took physics twice. Got a D both times.
Oh, man.
Nothing changed. Nothing changed. And I'm just like, okay, maybe I should, maybe medical school isn't for me. Let's try nursing. By the time towards the end of my college career, the nursing programs had changed. So now you could do a post-bac nursing program, which wasn't as common before. So I was like, I'm just going to go into one of these nursing programs and get my, BSN, and I'll be fine. Took all of the prereqs for that, started applying, and was like, I actually hate nursing. I hate this profession. I cannot see myself ever doing it. But a part of me just kept pushing, no, this is great. It's perfect. It will it makes a lot of money. You'll be fine. But I was like, I don't like it. I never want to do this. I never want to work in a position where I have to take care of somebody, because I don't care enough. But personality wise, I would have been perfect for the medicine, like for the nursing field. But just the idea of having to deal with the personalities of like, and the idea that while nurses actually do everything, a lot of us give more credit to the doctors and stuff like that.
For sure.
And I was like, I just can't live with that. Right. So, went right back to medicine. I was like, okay, let me just go back to where I started. Graduated from college. Graduated by the skin of my teeth, actually. It's something that a lot of people don't know because they know me as somebody who's super smart. And I'm like, no, I really struggled through college because I decided that I was going to stick with this pre-med thing, and it was making things really difficult for me in school. So I had actually graduated with a degree in public health and biology, a minor in psychology, because by this time I had taken so many classes. And I had my last year was supposed to be 2010. But I still didn't know what I was doing. And then to graduate, and I looked outside and I saw that the job market was trash. Right. And I was just like, I don't want to. So I stayed an extra year, graduate, start working for the health department of East Orange. I'm studying for my MCATs. My mom and my dad pay for MCAT prep program.
Oh boy.
It's $2,300 they pay for it. I take the course. I have the books, do all that stuff. I leave the health department. I start working at a cancer center. Around 2012, the summer, I'm scheduled to take my MCAT. I pay for the class. I pay for the exam, put the money down. 2 or 3 days before the exam, I'm like, I don't want to do this. I'm not interested. I hate this. By this time I had spent almost a year working in the cancer center. I worked with fellows. I worked with urologists. I had worked with all of them. I had heard their stories about medical school. I had heard their stories about like internships and residencies. And I realized there's nothing about this that draws me to it. There's nothing about it. And the fact that I want to change the world, I was like, I do not have to do it through medicine. Right. My parents right away? My parents, because at the time I was living at home, my parents are like the day of, they're like, oh, like your exam. I think I left the house and then came back as if I went.
Oh no.
And then like a month later, they're asking for the results.
So you didn't tell them for a month?
I found it so difficult to tell my parents things. And when I told them, like, my father exploded.
Because it's not just that you didn't take it, it's that they invested a significant amount of money in you and preparing for this.
Exactly. Yes. Because they were like, all right, you're already behind. And their whole thing was like, you're already behind. So we'll do whatever it takes to catch you up. And I was like, I don't want to catch up because I don't want to do this. But I couldn't bring myself to tell them. And so finally I was like, I have to. I have no choice but to tell them. And they're like, so what are you going to do with your life? And I got the bright idea to tell them I was going to go to grad school for epidemiology.
Wait. That's not what I expected. That's not where I thought this was going to go.
Exactly.
Epidemiology?
Because I could not find, I was like, I have to, for a long time, it was really hard for me to disappoint my parents. And like I said, I had been the perfect like first daughter for so much of my life that it was so hard to tell them, like, I don't want to do any of this. I'm not sure what I want to do, but I want to give me time to figure it out. And that idea of asking for that grace, which should be given to every person, was terrifying. And so I was like, I'm gonna go to school for epidemiology. And they're like, you can get a PhD in that, right? And I was like, yes. So you can still be a doctor. And I was just like, yes. So I'll get my master's and I get my PhD. And they're like, man, I got my PhD. Ooh, keep hitting this. So they're like, so it calmed them down a little bit. And they're like, okay, so apply. And I applied and I applied.
And this is not what you want to do.
No.
Okay, so you keep applying.
But I think even a part of me was afraid to even step out of the science field because I didn't know what else I was going to do. Despite the fact that at 4, I saw my talents and I knew what I was capable of. I remember even there was a quick second in high school where I was just like, maybe I should be a lawyer. I think I'd thrive there. My father was like, lawyers are liars. You're not going to law school. I was just like, wow, that's that on that. And I left it alone. But I was just like, there would be moments where I could see like what the possibilities were, but it was just so clouded by everything that was around me. And I think even when I was deciding to do epidemiology, the reason it came so quick to me, because it was like, what else am I going to do? What do I have the capabilities for? I don't know what else. Like what am I able to do? I don't know what else I have that I could call a career. And so I'm applying to schools. I'm doing all things. I'm still working at this Cancer Institute. And I'm not getting into any program. Every program is rejecting me. So I apply again. This time I apply for a different program. I applied for research and law. And I was like, maybe if I switch and I go towards something that seems a little bit more like me, because I had always been interested in research. And I was like, maybe I should do that. Still could not get into programs. By this time... Around this time, I had met Ashley Akunda of the Grapevine. I had met her, and we met through a mutual friend, and we had met at the block party, like Spike Lee's block party or something like that. And she's talking about how I'm getting a show together and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, that's nice. And I'm thinking in my head, like, all these arts people, like I was just like, how do they survive? And I'm thinking like, none of them have like real jobs. And I'm like, oh my God, now I'm eating my words.
That's hilarious.
But I'm just like, and she's telling me, and she's like, yeah, I went to film school. I was like, you went to film school? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, you're Nigerian and you went to film school? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, who paid for it? And she's just like, my parents. Like, I'm just like, what? And it blows my mind. But then she's talking about the show, and then she's just like, I think you're pretty good on the show. Do you want to be on it? And I was like, no, I don't belong on anybody's like show or anything like that. It's not my place. She was just like, oh, okay. Like, I think you'd be good at it though. And I was like, no. I was like, this girl doesn't know anything. I'm like, what makes you think that I'd be good on this show? Like, I was like, girl, do you know what I do? I was just like, I was like, my job is to deal with patients who have prostate cancer. But then I'm applying, and so in the midst of all of this, I'm applying to schools. I'm not getting in. I'm still stuck at this job that by this time I hate. Like, I'm miserable at my job. And I meet Ashley again the year that Sandra Bland had passed away. She had just died, just been murdered actually. And I had met Ashley with this mutual friend again at a happy hour, and we're on the train and we're talking, and Sandra Bland was one of those deaths that I was like furious about. And I'm just going on and on in the streets of like Times Square about how like we should have a right to be who we are, no matter, like, the police have no right to tell us to tone down or to, and by this time, especially if coming from experience, I was like, nobody has the right to tell me how to be who I want, like who I am. Nobody has a right to kill me because I am what I am. I'm not going to lessen myself to make you feel comfortable, especially not a white man. Like, I will never do that. We're on the train and Ashley's like, yeah, so this show, because I think in the midst of all of it, she had like stopped doing it, and then she came, and I think around this time she started working at AOL and was able to have the funds to like actually do the show. And she's just like, I'm getting my show on the ground, like up on the ground again. It's been, and I think at this time she had been like, had a year under her belt where she like in the format that it was, and she's just like, I think that should be really good. We're shooting in December, because I want to say this is like 2014 or 2015. And she's like, we're shooting in December. And I was just like, okay, send me the information and maybe I can do this. I was like, maybe I can be on somebody's show. So she sends me the information. So this was September I had saw her. She emails me to remind me. I send her, and she sends me the information for that December shoot. I walk into the studio, and I'm like, what am I doing here? Where, like, this is not where I belong. I don't have anything, like, this is nothing of, what the path that I'm, supposed to be going. Because still in my head, it was just like, okay, well, if I can't get a degree in epidemiology, research and law, I'll just get like a general public health master's, and I'll work it from there. Because by this time I was also having difficulties in finding new jobs as well too. Yeah. So I'm assuming that it's because I don't have a master's and all this stuff, despite having worked by this time like 3 or 4 years in the industry. So I get to this, so I'm at this kind of like feeling really out of place, because everybody there is some form of creative.
Yeah.
Like they're either in film, they're in music, dance, broadcasting, journalism, and I'm here just like feeling super out of place. And then she puts us on set, puts us on the table, and I get on, and it was the first time I had felt like I had belonged. The minute I started talking, and I was like, this is it. Mm-hmm. This is where I never felt like that before. And I got there, and I'm like nervous as hell. Like my leg is like shaking at the table, my hands are shaking, I'm sweating.
Of course.
But I'm like going on and on as if I know everything and anything. And I'm like, no, this is where I belong. And as the day goes on and every panel I'm on, I'm like, this is it. This is it. And by the time we had the last panel, I was like, I found my space.
The light bulb went off.
I found it. And then it only got confirmed by the response I got from people who are like, who's that girl? Like, I really loved her. Like, what she said about this and what she said about that. Like, I believe, like, I love what she's saying. And it was just like, so Ashley had me come on at other times, and I was like, I'm really good at this. Like, I'm really good at this. So how do I do this for a living? How do I change this around?
Was it that were you asking that question without consideration at that point for your parents and what they might think? So you're just like, okay, this is what I want to do, full stop.
Right. Mm-hmm. Because as somebody, I like comfort a lot. Mm-hmm. I know myself. I know that I like things I like to feel okay. Yeah. I don't like to feel uncomfortable, which is probably one of the worst things to deal with when you are on a path to like kind of create your own space in the world. Like, you have to be uncomfortable, but I like being comfortable. And when I got on set and I saw how comfortable I was and just how like I felt at home, nobody could take that away from me. And I was just like, I think I would say that the Grapevine definitely helped me in like, I don't want to say divorce my parents, but definitely divorce myself from the idea that I had to be who they wanted me to be, and just be like, no, I need to do this for myself. Like, where can I go, or how can I do this in order to be the person that I know I'm meant to be? Because like, there's so much more. I have so much to offer, and I'm being boxed in. And I think it was around that time I had realized that I do not like the feeling of being placed in a mold. I don't like the feeling of being restricted. I had also learned, and it was around that time I had realized, I was like, wow, me and the third don't do too well. and I had kind of mistaken myself as like, oh, I'm super quiet. I don't really talk too much. So I do what I'm asked to do. And it didn't dawn on me until like I was an adult that it's not that I do what I am asked to do. It's that if I don't want to do it, I just ignore it. I don't argue with you. I just ignore it. And I was like, because I'm not meant to be in these spaces. Right. And so, so I think at that moment I gave up everything concerning grad school. I do want to go back to school, but I think I want to this time on my own time and my own accord. And I know that now that I want to in that way, that the doors are going to open up, you know, in a way that they weren't opening in the past. So, but definitely kind of definitely have been in this space where I'm more myself, because I have found spaces where I can like actually utilize talents that I thought were meant for medicine. I thought were meant for like this world that was created for me, but it's actually like best utilized in the creative spaces. And also made me realize how I would like restrict the idea of a creative, because when there's creativity even in medicine, and it's made me realize it's also made me realize that, and just like how it's definitely changed my mindset concerning medicine and surgery, and like how we heal people. And so it's definitely like just changed me overall as a person, the way that I view things, and kind of just like how fluid all of these things are.
Sure. But what does that pivot look like professionally? Because I think a lot of people have come to that realization where they're like, I'm trying to fit into a more traditional, financially stable professional path, and that's not for me, but they don't know how to make the switch in a way where they can keep the lights on. So have you found a way to do that, or a happy medium, or a way to like kind of feed that piece of yourself but still conform in a sense to be able to live that comfortable life you're talking about?
So I have not.
Okay.
So I left the Cancer Institute and I'm working for a research and publication company, oncology research and publication. And it sucks. I hate my job, but and I've experienced a lot of things that many people in corporate do as far as race and gender, which is why I'm looking for another job, because I'm like, it doesn't pay me enough to go through this hell. And I think that for a while you're going to have to straddle the sides, unless you're willing to deal with not eating. And I'm just not one of those people. I was on my podcast, we were talking around the tape. We were talking to an artist, and she said that, you know, she had to give up her 9 to 5 in order to fully commit to her art. And I was just like, there's two types of people in the world. There's people who have been through poverty and who are just kind of like, well, I can do it again. I've already done it. And then there's all people who are, I'm never going back to that. Right. And I was like, I am of the latter. I never want to experience some type of poverty that I experienced when I was growing up. I don't want to live like that anymore. I want my comfort, which makes it difficult to a lot of times to like move forward in my writing, in creating content. And it's just, because this is not something that I'm used to, I'm still trying to find the balance. And I'm also learning that it is okay to learn the process as I go along. Absolutely. Because for a long time, when I did realize, like, oh, this is what I want to do, I also had the mindset that it had to be perfect and I had to jump in immediately, because that was how medicine was set up. And that's how like that world was set up. And this isn't like that. There's also not as much space to fail, but failure is allowed. Right. And you utilize your failures to create more and continue. If it doesn't work, if this idea doesn't work, okay, bring it back to the drawing board, as opposed to like the whole thing is a wash.
And I appreciate you saying that, because I think sometimes there's this judgment towards creatives or people who have a desire to build a brand or anything entrepreneurially, when they do kind of remain within the confines of a more traditional job, as if like you're not about it, like if you're not fully into it. And I tell people who haven't been on both sides of the fence, I've been through that entrepreneurial thing, I've been through a hybrid, I've been through corporate, you have to know yourself. And the stress and anxiety and the financial instability of trying to build something 100% of the time and not having that guaranteed check, even if it's at a job that you hate, it is not for everyone. And it can manifest, the effects of that can manifest in a lot of different ways, namely health issues, right, mental health stuff. You just like, everybody's just not built for it. And there's no harm in doing what's best for you and saying, I'm not about that poor life, or wondering if they're going to come cut my lights off. There's nothing wrong with going to a job and slowly building something else on the side. Exactly.
And I think that people also forget that there's also the possibility, which is where I'm leading, going to, all of this can converge in a setting that pays you regularly. And like, my dream is to find a job that doesn't collide with my creative endeavors, and instead coexist with it and benefits, and everything benefits from each other. I want that type of situation in my life. I don't necessarily know. I was like, and maybe after that I will completely be that true entrepreneur that we tend to romanticize entrepreneurship to be. But my dream right now is to kind of create that coexistence between my job, between a career corporate job and the creative work that I do. Right. I want them to, combine with each other, and I want them to kind of like work together. I don't want them to be parallels anymore. I want them to converge. I think that, like I said, we romanticize entrepreneurship. I was a child of an entrepreneur, and I have so many friends that are entrepreneurs that work for themselves. Yeah. And something that I've always known, and something that they say that nobody ever talks about, is that this stuff is still work. It's still work. There are going to be days when you're like, I don't want to do this at all. Exactly. I don't want to look at another number, concerning how I'm going to break down my budget. I don't want to have to train another person today because it's affecting my ability to it's affecting my health because I'm sick but yet I have to go to the gym and train this person. I don't want to have to do this person's hair. I don't want to have to do this person's nails. I don't want to have to write the script. I don't want to have to send in this I don't want to have to send in this business plan, because I'm a consultant, and all of it because I'm tired.
Right.
And when you work for yourself, you are on 24/7. It takes a long time when you can create a situation where you are not working 24 hours a day.
And where you're making money in your sleep or what have
exactly.
you. Or you've got a staff. And a lot of things have to collide at the right time for that to happen. I know plenty of people who had the hustle and the savvy, and the timing was just right.
Exactly.
Or they're building something and somebody else came to the market and had more money behind them to market more quickly and dominated. There are all these factors. And it takes a while.
It does.
There are very few people I know who jump into something and it's it just takes off in the first year. And usually if it does, it's a flash in the pan that is not sustainable.
Exactly.
But in that runway that you need, it requires money. It requires a level of energy and persistence, even on the days that you don't feel like it.
Exactly.
And I think the one thing too that we don't discuss enough, we've talked about on the show, is that life doesn't stop.
It does not stop.
You get sick, people get sick, people die around you, unexpected bills, all these things happen where in a normal setting where you have a 9 to 5, it's I need to take a few personal days to deal with this.
Right.
That's not always possible when you're building something over here that's not self-sustaining yet, where you can step away. And some people are built for it and, they make it work, but that's not everybody.
It isn't. And I think that we should stop. We should leave people alone to because the whole point of leaving many times corporate America is to create our own path, to create how we want to do this or how we want to figure this out. So to force people into now the idea of what we think entrepreneurship looks like or what that creative space looks like is no better than what they left.
Right.
And I think that people should be allowed to, however their journey manifests, should be allowed to do that and just hope that they are successful so that they can survive and be happy. Because at the end of the day, all of this is to be happy, to fulfill our lives, to fulfill our purposes. And that was kind of what propelled me to be I'm going to leave this medicine stuff alone because that's not my purpose. And I have to be okay with that not being my purpose. There's something that I was 4 years old and I said that I was going to write and tell stories. And then I spent, my childhood playing games where I would tell adults these stories. And I was this is what I'm meant to do. This is where I'm meant to go. I've had this my whole entire life. I was that child that lived in books. My parents would drop us off at the library during the summertime, so we would spend hours there. And I think at 10, I read I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, and I read all, and then I sat in the library and read all of Maya Angelou's books, and I was like, how do you write like this? How do you do this? How do you I want to do this? And I think it was in college. No, a little bit after college, I had read The Things Around Your Neck by Chimamanda Adichie, and I remember getting to the last page, and I was just this is what I want to do. I want to write like this. I want to write the way that she has written. I want to impact somebody so much that they close the book and they change their whole lives.
Right.
And when I think of things like that, there's a feeling that I get that is indescribable, and it's not something that I've ever experienced reading an MCAT book, taking a chemistry lab. Even though I love those things, I'm still a fan of science and research and all that stuff, and it's what I do really well, and I love it. But it's those talents are meant to fulfill something else.
Right. As a fellow bookworm, I'm going to ask you this question: do you ever read? I remember it also happened to me reading Maya for the first time, where you read a few lines that are just so great that you gotta step away for a second. You literally have to put the book down. What masterpiece that perfect piece of prose. And it's where does that come from? And when you're inspired, I think whatever it is that you're into and what you're passionate about, be it literature or music or film, when you get that feeling, you know, where it's almost like the hairs are standing up, those things are not to be ignored.
Right.
And I think growing up in communities and families in which people worked really hard for what they thought was safe, right? And as you mentioned, guaranteed, it can be hard to see the thing that really gets your gears turning as the thing that can create a financially viable life for you as well. And there is no roadmap to make that happen. It takes a lot of trying and sort of modifying. And if you don't want to do that full time, it also takes more time, right, to figure that out as well. And I do have respect for the people that are in it with both feet. But how is that manifesting for you today, sort of feeding that creativity and the freedom that you so love and desire?
So I'm on the Grapevine. And I love the format that Ashley has offered. She gives us stuff to read, and she kind of gives us questions to like kind of think about. But when we get on set, the conversation is organic. It doesn't matter what question she's placed on the paper. The conversation can go anywhere else. I mean, she's a great host where she tries to bring it back in, but she really gives us a space to talk about it the way that, you know, it's meant to happen. And it's why so many like great moments have come from that show. I'm also a co-host on Run the Tape, which is a hip hop podcast, which is another thing that I was just like, I don't think I could do this. And I declined when I was first asked. And then I thought about it and I realized that like I'm selling myself short and I have to like, this is a space that I can definitely like thrive in. And I have. And despite because one of the reasons I didn't want to go on a show is my parents were super strict, and so even music was like very.
That's what I was gonna ask. Are you even a hip hop head?
So as I got older, I became one, and but as a kid, I had to sneak a lot of things, and it was like kind of like. If I got a chance to hang out with my cousins whose parents weren't as strict, or like from school picking up pieces here and there, there was a lot of TV moments I missed because we didn't have a TV. My father was I don't think we got cable until I was 16 or 17. So like there's so many things I had missed and I had to catch up when I was in college, and I played catch up a lot. But I realized, because I was a guest on the show before I became a co-host, and I'm sitting on the show and I was like, I'm really good at analyzing albums. Like this is like, you know, I'm really good at breaking down the music and figuring out somebody's flow is really good. And I just sent my co-host a text about like an artist that contacted us, and I was like, oh, the music is okay. Broke down like the production and stuff like that. He was just like, well, look at you, Elliot Wilson. And I was like, I've always been able to do this. I've just been afraid to do it in public. You know, and so my co-host, who is actually the creator of the show, is also really great in kind of fostering a space where he's just like, I just want you to grow. Because he's like, I see it, I know it. You have the talents for it, and I just want you to have the space to grow in that way. And I can definitely say with me being on the show, we have like really attained heights that I don't think he even saw happening. I think I had when I got on the show, I even think that I had bigger dreams, and I would tell him, and he'd be like, you think that could happen with the show? Like, I know our first live show, and he had booked the space, and I was like, oh, no, the space is too small. And he's just like, really? I was like, no, it's too small. Like, for our first show, we can definitely book up, like, the number of people, the guests, we're going to have a lot. And he's just like, I don't know. I was like, no. We have the capabilities. And I remember thinking later, like, where did that come from? Like, where was that my ability, you know, because that confidence in myself wasn't there years ago. Which is why it was like that same confidence is what brought me to create Inside the Pink with Aisha Faines. And it was a child in my head for a baby in my head for a long time. I just wanted to be able to tell the stories of Black people. I wanted to tell the stories of Black women in particular, because we are being erased from society. And I was just like, I was like, I'm not interested in that continuing. I always say that my goal in life is to change the gatekeepers of the game, whatever game that is. I want more Black women to be at the helm. I want them to be the ones to make the decisions, because I'm like, we carry the culture, and I want us to be at the forefront. And so Inside the Pink was that bringing that goal to life. And I love doing it loved. Unfortunately, we had to take a break because life continues. Life happens, financial matters happen, schedules change, death happens. We had so many different experiences where I was almost afraid to come back because I'm like, what if people forget us? What if people don't want to hear what we have to say anymore because we've been away for so long?
And it's important to note that you guys are putting up numbers.
Yeah,
like
we were doing really
well.
well. And I just was like, and I felt like I was like in college when I had first hit failure. I was devastated because this was probably my first, and I don't want to call it a failure, but it was the first time I had been hit with something similar since college. And I was just like, well, you can't do what you did before. You can't run away anymore. You have to actually, because you're going to fail. You're going to deal with situations that you have to redirect yourself. And not every fail. It's not, I would call it I've come to start calling it a redirection. It's not necessarily a failure. So like, I'm currently trying to bring back Inside the Pink, and I know that I'm going to bring it back because it means too much to me. And I know that it's going to mean an incredible amount to Black women who haven't heard their voices somewhere else, who haven't heard something that's about them. And I don't want to be in a situation where I am interviewing somebody and they're telling me a story about their idea and it's the same idea I had. And it's just like they had the confidence to put it out there and I didn't. And now they're doing amazing with it. And I'm like, well, what could have happened if it was me? I don't want to experience, and I've experienced that, and I don't want to experience that again. So when that's the self-serving part of it, but overall I want to change culture, and I know Inside the Pink will do that. Run the Tape is doing that right now, and the Grapevine is doing that right now, and every platform that I find myself on is changing how we view culture, how we view people, and I want to continue that with whatever I do.
What's interesting is you mentioned a redirection, but also that sort of fear of failure or response to that. But the audience is giving you something different. The audience is saying, you have something here because we're tuning in. And there are mitigating factors that were preventing that from happening. But when the audience is into it, and we were talking about this a little bit before we pressed record, while yes, there's some credence to like consistency is key, and people, we have like this microwave culture, and if you're not here today, people are just on to something else
very quickly. Yes.
However, I feel that when people are on a hiatus, but they have built that core audience of like rabid fans that are loyal, and you've been out there just in a different mediums, when you do come back, I feel like they're going to be with it, even if it comes back in a different format or a different sort of platform or what have you.
No, I believe, and that's the thing. I think I've changed a lot of things concerning me. Like I've changed the language that I speak. I've changed how I approach things. A lot of times it's like, oh, I can't do this because it's failing. I can't touch it. And that comes, and I realized for a long time it came from fear from watching my father fail many times. But what I didn't pick up was the fact that he would continue on to a next, continue into a next project because the failure was just a jump start for the next idea. And I realized that my father never saw these things as failures. He saw them as redirections. He saw them as like, okay, well, I need to change or tweak this or move this around. And there was always customers. Something that I never realized until I got older, and I really sat down and thought about like where, in therapy, of course, because
shout out to therapy. We're huge proponents on this show.
As you get older, and you're like, and then especially the experience that I had with my parents, like, while I love them to death, and I was like, I have to work through some things. It made me realize that a lot of this fear wasn't my own. Because as your parents get older, they also, the things that they did in their past, they don't want you to do it. Right. So while my father was like great with, doing things and starting off for again, he wasn't interested in that being my life. And I get it. And so, as I try to, basically I don't want to talk in a negative. I'm a realist. I believe that like I speak things as they are. I'm not the eternal optimist. I'm not the toxic optimist either. But I don't want to speak negativity into things that haven't started yet. And I think for a long time I was doing that. I was immediately assuming the worst. Yeah. And instead of thinking like, what if it is okay? What if it works? And if it doesn't, why wouldn't there be another option? And I think in the past couple of years, especially because my life has changed drastically personally, like there's so many different things that has happened where I'm just like, where did I go wrong? But then like, but then at the same time, I think in that it's given me space to grow where I can be a better communicator and give to the world what I want to give to them. Absolutely. So, you know, and I've spent the last year not only like, so I divorced myself from my ideas of my parents, and then spent the last year like kind of divorcing myself from the ideas of religion and how it's been presented to me. And in that I have found a lot more peace, and that's kind of how it allowed me to shift my mindset, because I was living very much in a world of brim and firestone. Yes. Brimstone and fire.
Yeah, fire and brimstone.
Fire and brimstone, where like if you did something wrong, you're going to be punished. And I've definitely moved myself from that. And it's just given me space to be like, if it doesn't go the way that you think it should, or if it does fail, excuse me, you have options.
Right. And I think that point you brought up speaks to cultural issues, religious issues, etc. We say that we operate in grace, but because in so many instances the way we sort of paint Christianity, or you know, whatever version of that you subscribe to, and the way we paint our lives as Black people, you got one shot. Right. Everything is like one shot, and if you fail at that shot, the whole thing is caving in on you. Everything crumbles. And I think we need to do a better job of extending grace to ourselves and to other people, right? To find their way. And it's why one of the reasons I love doing this show, because we've started to have honest conversations about trying things that don't work, or starting on a path and doing all this work on this lane and realizing, not for me, I want to move over here. And that's something that I think our white counterparts are given the space to do more often than we are.
Is it okay if I bring up another podcast on this?
Sure, okay. Go for it.
Do you listen to How I Built This?
Yes.
One of my favorite podcasts, but also infuriating.
Yes, we have talked about this. We have talked about this ad nauseum off the air. We brought the show up on the air, but I had to stop. I had to take a break for a bit. But there was a point where I listened to that show every single week.
It's infuriating because it's like, recently I listened to Luke's Lobster and grew up in the lobster business. The guy who created it grew up in the lobster business. His father gave them lobsters to start the business. And I was just like, and think about how expensive lobsters are. Yes. And his father had like a lobster factory where they like got the meat out and stuff like that. Father would drive down from Maine and bring it to them in New York. And then he stayed and helped them work. And they didn't have any workers. They just had themselves. And I just remember thinking, like, my father doesn't own a lobster factory. Right. My father doesn't own these things. My mom doesn't know, you know, she doesn't know a Toria Birch to like help me start off. She doesn't know a Kate Spade. She doesn't, you know, I don't have a husband that can sit in the house with me and create bags, like, and then I don't have, like, those things don't exist. And the crazy thing is like many people talk about how Black women are like the highest, the biggest number of entrepreneurs and business owners growing in the country. Well, a lot of people don't realize the number, a lot of people don't realize the experience behind the numbers. Yes. How these businesses don't actually grow past like, you know, a one woman job, how it doesn't actually create jobs because they don't make enough money to do it. And how like a lot of times it's kind of like touted out as a form of diversity for banks, when in reality, like they're not even giving them the loans that actually can sustain their businesses. And then you go on and I listen to How Do I Build This? And people are truly making millions.
And they're like, well, it started with a small loan of $50,000
from my
like, parents.
Or like there's people who are like, you know, they kept getting loan after loan after loan after failing. Like there are some people who are like, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur because I knew I could work in an office. And I was just like, yeah, I can't work in an office either, but I don't have that choice. I don't have, because I don't know. There was an article recently on Zora Mag, which is on Medium, and it was called From Pet to Threat. And it's basically about the experience of Black women in the office where they start off as the pet, where everybody likes them, and then all of a sudden just like everything shifts.
Yes.
Nobody likes you, or like everything that you do is a problem. All of a sudden you're not moving up. You're not getting promotions. Your job seems to all of a sudden be in danger. And it's basically that everybody in your job or the people or your superiors recognize your talent and now because of that, you have become a threat to them because you're not supposed to be this talented. You're not supposed to be this great.
Yep.
And so they do everything in their power to minimize you in the workspace. Some even go as far as firing. And I remember reading this and I was like, it's not even conducive for us to be in the workforce, but we don't have a choice.
Right.
And you have people who can literally say, I didn't even want to I didn't even want to work in the office. So I just got this money from my parents and failed and got some more money and failed again and got some more money. And we struck gold this time. My parents would have told me to kick rocks because my parents are like, you have 6 other siblings that we have to worry about.
Right.
There's no way we're going to give you $100,000 for anything.
For any reason.
They're like, we don't even have $100,000. Like all of us, like all my siblings we all took school loans. Like there's like, my father actually, cause we all went to, private school. By the time my last 2 sisters got into high school, my father was just like, so we're no longer doing the private school thing.
Wow.
Charter schools became a thing. He was like, everybody's going to charter school. Like, and my little sister, she's in public school. Like she's a sophomore at Newark Tech, which is something that my father refused adamantly when I was in school. But now he's just like, no, the schools are fine.
Those bills hit different after 4 or 5 kids.
Exactly. Like he was, but it's true. Like he really underestimated the Newark school system, particularly their magnet schools. And so, but yeah, I don't have that space. And I love that show and I love the hope and inspiration it offers, but it also doesn't offer reality sometimes, particularly. And I always say this about the show, how much I love it, but there's a reason why there's not a lot of Black entrepreneurs on that show because they don't have that story. And because the reality is that it's hard to find us.
Yes.
So
absolutely. And find us at that level of success where it makes for an appealing story for their audience.
Right. Because I think Carol's daughter was on it, the guy who created FUBU.
And the woman who has like one of the largest, most successful staffing firms. I forget her name. She was on there. Yeah.
That's her. Logic was there, but he's biracial. So that's a little, and that was such an odd episode to me. But it's so, our presence there is so minimal, and I'm just like, Roz, like, look for us, because then you'll get a real story of what it is to be an entrepreneur in America, because it's way different than having, your parents to catch you when you fall in these situations.
Absolutely. So speaking of falling and the not so pretty parts of life, tell me about a time when you had to be extraordinary on an ordinary day.
I don't know if this, oh God.
Just go with your gut.
I want to say that when there was a time when it was summertime in the Grapevine, and I had experienced a really horrible family issue. I came to set crying. Like I remember getting there, saying hey to everybody, going into the bathroom, sobbing, got my makeup done. And the whole day I was going back and forth between the bathroom and cry, and then come back out, do the panel, go back into the bathroom and cry. Some of the best episodes I ever shot, though.
Wow.
And not to get too into it, the situation that happened, but it was something that had devastated me. Like I wanted to not show up that day. I wanted to not do anything. And I remember 3 years later, because I think this happened in 2020. I want to say this happened in 2018, so 2 years. And I was telling Ashley about it, Ashley and Doug Rubenstein from the show. And he was like, you were crying that day? And I was just like, yeah. And Ashley was like, you were crying? I was like, yo, I cried the whole day. Then I cried on the way home. And I would just go to the bathroom, fix my makeup. I'd come back out and I'd shoot. And I think I did that because I was like, this is how life is. None of this is going to stop. And I'm sure like because Ashley and I are friends, and she's also a human being. Like, she understands that like things happen. She's had her own moments, and it's like she would have absolutely understood if I had to take a day, you know. But I knew that I couldn't do that. I knew that I love this so much that whatever it is, like, I have to work through it. I have to get past it. I'll cry when I get home. I'll cry in like the moments that I have an opportunity. And that's what I did. And I had some really amazing moments and it's probably because I was so determined to stay there.
Yeah.
So, that's happened once or twice after. But I'm not interested in giving up, because I have to deal with life. I have to deal with what I want to do. Like, I have to, life goes on.
It never stops.
It never. Even those moments where you wanted to like, you just needed to pause so you can breathe a little. It doesn't. So you have to breathe while moving.
Right. So what's next for Uchechi?
A lot more writing. I hope to get myself published a couple more times this year. It's my goal to find myself in bigger publications, not for money, because they are funny what the hell they pay.
True.
Because that net 30 and that net 90 is not fun.
Serious, yeah.
But I want to get my writing out there. I want to be recognized as a writer. It's great to be seen as like, what's the word I'm looking for? Content creator is fine. Maybe like a social personality. I don't know. But I'm not interested in being a media influencer, which I think is great. And that's a lane for other people. But like, I want to be known for writing. I want to know for the work that I do. I want to be known for breaking down something so intricately that you're like, this changes my mind completely. So I want to do things like that. I'm working really hard on bringing back Inside the Pink. And I want Run the Tape to grow. We're working really hard on that. We're working really hard on kind of being permanent in the hip hop culture. I want to make sure that is my vehicle to protect, like, you know, as somebody who loves Black music and Black culture, and hip hop is essentially is a huge part of Black culture, Black American culture. I want to protect it, and Run the Tape is my vehicle to do so. And of course, I want to grow with the Grapevine. It was the door to everything. It essentially changed my life. I'm always grateful for Ashley and Donovan and Amanda for seeing something, particularly Ashley for seeing something in me that I still had not seen, and giving me the space to show the world. So,
you know what I sense? I sense that you've found your voice, but there's a whole other dimension and depth to it that hasn't been revealed yet, and I'm excited to see where you go with that.
I agree. Because like I said, life, so like, yeah, sure, my parents, that's cool, but but life has changed so much in the space, in the time that, like, so much. And it changed how I express myself. It changes what I think about certain things, and it has definitely it has brought to the forefront another layer that I didn't even know existed. So yes, I'm excited to, because I don't force myself to dig deep to like look for it. I allow it to come up in itself, and then it's coming up, and I'm excited as well.
And shout out to Aisha K. Faines.
Yes,
Ashley
shout out
Acuna, former guest of the show.
Shout out to my girls. They're like, we've all created like a family, and they have been. I always tell them that they, in the moments where they didn't realize it, they saved me, and they saved my life, because I'm not sure where I would be if I didn't find a space that I felt belonged to me. So,
well, listen, I'm going to be waiting to hear what else you have to say, because there's a lot in there, for sure. There's a lot more
absolutely,
in there.
Absolutely.
In the interim, where can people find you online?
So everybody can find me at Words by Uchechi. So that's WORDSBYUCHECHI on Twitter and on Instagram. What's funny is that for a long time, my social media was super private, and then everybody's screaming at me, "Please open your social media."
That struggle. I'm in it right now. Yes.
So it's open. So feel free to follow me. Sometimes I say things on Twitter. If I say so myself, I think I'm pretty smart on Twitter. Yeah. That you can also find me on Run the Tape Pod on all social medias as well too. Something happened to the Inside the Pink Instagram. I have a feeling that somebody like reported us, some random person. So I'm rebuilding up our social media. So, but Words by Uchechi is my personal, so you can find me there. So
well, thank you for coming in today with your fly boots.
Oh,
and all.
thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. I really love doing this.
You were great. So to our listeners, follow Uchechi. Read her words. You've got articles out there published.
I do on Medium. You can also find me on Medium as well. Just look up Uchechi Chinyere. So only 2 are there, but you know, as the year progresses, we'll see more.
Got it. So make sure you check out her work online. Always support the Grapevine and other podcasts like Run the Tape, and look for Inside the Pink to come back for sure. You can do it. They're waiting.
No, I'm absolutely. It means too much
for sure. So. And as always, make sure you like, share, subscribe to this podcast, and remember to be extraordinary on an ordinary day. Take care.